The stagecoach rattled to a halt in front of the Benton depot, and Olivia Bradford clutched her black morning dress tighter around her shoulders, the dust from Montana territory swirling up like ghosts from her past. Through the window, she could see a lone figure standing near the wooden platform, tall and broad-shouldered, his hat pulled low against the afternoon sun of late summer, 1882. That had to be Warren Sutton, the man she had agreed to marry sight unseen, the man whose carefully written letters had promised her safety and a new beginning when her world had crumbled into ashes back in Philadelphia. But what Warren's letters had not mentioned was how her heart might feel when she stepped off that coach, still raw and bleeding from losing everything that mattered. Her mother, her father, and sweet little Thomas, all taken by the fever within a week of each other just 3 months past. The only thing that had kept Olivia moving forward was the knowledge that staying in that empty house, surrounded by memories and debts she could never repay, would have driven her to madness. The driver opened the door and extended a weathered hand. Olivia took it, her legs unsteady after days of travel, and descended onto the dusty street of Benton. The town was smaller than she had imagined, a collection of wooden buildings lining a single main road, with the Rocky Mountains rising like sentinels in the distance. It was beautiful in a stark, unforgiving way that matched the landscape of her grief. Warren removed his hat as he approached, revealing dark hair that fell just past his collar and eyes the color of Montana sky. He was younger than she had expected, perhaps 27 or 28, and there was something gentle in the way he moved despite his size. His face was sun-weathered and strong, but there was a sadness there too, hiding in the corners of his mouth and the set of his jaw. "Miss Bradford." His voice was deep and careful, like he was afraid of startling a wounded animal. "Mr. Sutton." Olivia's own voice sounded hollow even to her ears. She tried to smile, tried to be the woman he had agreed to marry through those hopeful letters, but her face would not cooperate. Warren studied her for a long moment, and she saw recognition dawn in his eyes. Not recognition of her specifically, but of the grief that clung to her like a second skin. He knew that particular kind of hollowness. "You have had loss," he said quietly, and it was not a question. "Yes." The single word was all she could manage without breaking entirely. He nodded slowly, then bent to retrieve her trunk from where the driver had deposited it. "The preacher is waiting at the church, but if you need time, if you need to rest first, that can be arranged." This kindness, unexpected and genuine, nearly undid her. Olivia had prepared herself for many things during the long journey west. She had prepared for disappointment, for a harsh man who wanted only a housekeeper and someone to warm his bed. She had prepared for regret and homesickness, and the terrible finality of marrying a stranger. But she had not prepared for understanding, and it left her defenseless. "I do not wish to delay what has been agreed upon," she said, straightening her spine in the way her mother had taught her. "I am here to fulfill my obligations." Something flickered across Warren's face, something that might have been pain or resignation. "Marriage should not be an obligation," he said, then shook his head as if arguing with himself. "But these are the arrangements we have made, and I am a man of my word. Come, I will take you to meet Reverend Thomas." The church was a simple white building at the end of the street, its steeple modest but proud against the vast Montana sky. Inside, it smelled of pine and old hymn books, and the Reverend was a portly man with kind eyes who looked between Olivia and Warren with obvious concern. "Perhaps we should speak privately first," Reverend Thomas suggested, directing his words to Olivia. "It is important that you understand this is your choice, young lady. If you have doubts, if you need more time, there are options." Warren had stepped back, giving her space, and Olivia appreciated that more than she could say. But what were her options, truly? Return to Philadelphia, to a house that would be sold for debts, to streets filled with memories of her family, to a society that had no place for a woman alone without money or connections. She had spent her last dollars on the train ticket west. "I understand my choice, Reverend," Olivia said. "Mr. Sutton has been honest in his correspondence, and I intend to honor the agreement we made." The ceremony was brief and somber, more like a business transaction than a celebration, and Olivia spoke her vows in a voice that sounded like it belonged to someone else entirely. Warren's hands were warm when he took hers, calloused from years of ranch work, but his touch was gentle. When the Reverend pronounced them husband and wife, Warren did not kiss her. Instead, he squeezed her hand softly and said, "Thank you." They walked from the church to a wagon waiting on the street, Olivia's trunk already loaded in the back. Warren helped her onto the seat with careful courtesy, then climbed up beside her and took the reins. As they rolled out of Benton toward his ranch, the afternoon sun cast long shadows across the prairie, and Olivia felt the weight of her new reality settling over her like a heavy blanket. "My ranch is about 5 miles out," Warren said, after they had traveled in silence for several minutes. "It is not much, but the house is solid and the land is good for cattle. I have 3 hands who work for me, decent men who keep to themselves mostly. There is a creek that runs through the property, and in spring the wildflowers cover the hills." Olivia nodded, unsure what to say. Warren glanced at her, then returned his eyes to the road ahead. "I can see you are hurting," he continued, his voice low and steady. "I will not press you about it now, but when you are ready to talk, I am a good listener. And I want you to know that I do not expect anything from you except what you are willing to give. We are married in the eyes of God and the law, but you need time to heal, and I will respect that." Something inside Olivia cracked at these words, and she felt tears pricking at her eyes. She had cried so much in the past months that she thought herself empty of tears, but apparently there were always more. She turned her face away, trying to hide her weakness, but Warren had already seen. "It is all right to cry," he said gently. "Grief is not something to be ashamed of." "You speak as if you know it well," Olivia managed, her voice thick. "I do." Warren was quiet for a moment, the only sounds the creaking of the wagon and the steady clip-clop of the horses' hooves. "I lost my wife and daughter 4 years ago, complications from childbirth. Mary lived for 2 days and little Catherine not even that long." Olivia turned to stare at him, shock cutting through her own grief. "I am so sorry, I did not know." "I did not write about it in my letters," Warren admitted. "It seemed like too heavy a burden to put on paper, too much sadness to lay at the feet of a stranger. But you should know the truth now. You should know that I understand what it is to lose everything that matters, what it is to wake up each day and have to remember all over again that they are gone." The ranch came into view as they crested a small rise, and Olivia saw a low house built of logs and stone, solid and weathered by wind and time. There was a barn behind it, and several outbuildings and corrals where cattle grazed peacefully in the fading light. It was isolated and lonely looking, but there was something honest about it too, something real in a way that her life in Philadelphia had not been for a long time. Warren brought the wagon to a stop in front of the house and helped Olivia down. Her legs were stiff from travel, and she stumbled slightly, but he caught her elbow and steadied her. For a moment, they stood there close together, and Olivia could smell leather and sage and something clean and masculine that was purely Warren. Then he stepped back, giving her space again, always careful, always respectful. "Come inside," he said. "You must be exhausted." The house was simple but clean, with a main room that served as both kitchen and living area, a table made of rough-hewn wood, a stone fireplace, and several chairs covered with worn blankets. There were 2 doors leading off the main room, and Warren gestured to the one on the left. "That is the bedroom. You will sleep there. I will take the room on the right, which I use for storage mostly. I can clear it out and make it comfortable enough." Olivia looked at him in surprise. "You would give me the only proper bedroom. You are my wife," Warren said simply. "And like I said, I will not press you for anything you are not ready to give. When and if you want to share a bed, that will be your decision to make." This was so far from what Olivia had expected that she found herself at a loss for words. The few married women she had spoken to before leaving Philadelphia had warned her about the demands husbands made, the intimate duties that were expected regardless of a wife's feelings. But Warren was offering her something she had not dared hope for: time and space and the freedom to heal at her own pace. "Thank you," she whispered. Warren nodded and carried her trunk into the bedroom, setting it down at the foot of a large bed covered with a quilt in shades of blue and green. "This was Mary's quilt," he said, running a hand over the fabric. "She made it the first winter we were married. If it bothers you to use it, I can find something else." "No," Olivia said quickly. "It is beautiful. I would be honored to use it." Something in Warren's expression softened. "She would have liked you, I think. Mary had a kind heart, and she always said the world needed more kindness." That night, Olivia lay awake in the unfamiliar bed, listening to the sounds of the Montana night through the open window. Coyotes called in the distance, and the wind rustled through the grass with a sound like whispering voices. She thought about Warren sleeping in the other room, this stranger who was now her husband, this man who carried his own grief like a physical weight but still found room to be gentle with hers. She thought about her family, gone forever, and about the life she had left behind. She thought about the future that stretched ahead, uncertain and frightening, but also somehow full of possibility. And she cried, quietly, letting the tears soak into Mary's quilt, releasing some small portion of the pain that had been building inside her for months. In the morning, Olivia woke to the smell of coffee and bacon. She dressed quickly in one of her simpler dresses, dark blue rather than black, and emerged from the bedroom to find Warren at the stove, cooking breakfast with competent efficiency. "I hope you slept well," he said, glancing over his shoulder. "Well enough, considering." Olivia moved to the table, unsure what was expected of her. "I should be doing that. I should be cooking for you." Warren shook his head. "You have been traveling for days. One more morning of rest will not hurt anything. Sit. Eat. There will be plenty of time for you to learn the routines of this place." They ate in companionable silence, and Olivia found herself studying Warren when she thought he was not looking. In the morning light streaming through the windows, she could see the fine lines around his eyes, the silver just beginning to thread through his dark hair, the strength in his hands as he held his coffee cup. He was handsome in a rough, weathered way, but more than that. There was something fundamentally decent about him that made her feel safer than she had felt in months. After breakfast, Warren showed her around the ranch. He introduced her to his 3 hands. Jake, a grizzled man in his 50s who had worked cattle all his life. Tom, younger and quieter with a scar across his left cheek from some old fight. And Miguel, who had come up from Texas and spoke with a soft accent that reminded Olivia of music. They all tipped their hats respectfully and welcomed her politely, but she could see the questions in their eyes. What kind of woman had their boss married? Would she last out here in this harsh country? Warren showed her the barn, where his horses nickered softly, and the smell of hay and leather hung thick in the air. He showed her the chicken coop and the root cellar and the smokehouse. He explained how the ranch worked, how they moved the cattle between pastures depending on the season, how they prepared for the brutal Montana winters when the snow could pile up to the roof and they might not see town for months. "It is hard work," he said honestly, "and hard living sometimes. But it is good land, and I have built something here that I am proud of. I hope you can come to see it that way too in time." "I will try," Olivia promised, though she could not yet imagine feeling pride or joy or anything beyond the numbness that had become her constant companion. The days fell into a rhythm after that. Olivia took over the cooking and cleaning, grateful for tasks that kept her hands busy and her mind occupied. Warren was gone much of the day, working the ranch with his men, but he always came back for the midday meal and again in the evening. They talked during these meals, carefully at first, sharing small pieces of their lives. Warren told her about growing up in Wyoming, about his father who had been a cavalry scout and his mother who had died when he was 12. He told her about coming to Montana Territory at 22, full of dreams and determination to build something of his own. He told her about Mary, whom he had met at a church social in Benton, and how he had loved her from the first moment he saw her smile. "I never thought I would marry again," Warren admitted one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sun set over the mountains. "After Mary died, I thought that part of my life was over. But loneliness is its own kind of death, slow and cold, and I realized I did not want to face the rest of my life alone." Olivia understood that feeling all too well. "I never expected to be married at all," she confessed. "My family had some money once, but my father made bad investments. When the fever took them, I was left with nothing but debts, and the knowledge that I had no place in the world I had known. Your advertisement for a wife seemed like the only door that had not closed in my face." "I am glad you answered," Warren said quietly. "I know this is not what you dreamed of, but I promise I will do everything I can to make you happy here." "You have already been kinder than I had any right to expect," Olivia replied, and she meant it. As the weeks passed, Olivia began to feel the first faint stirrings of something beyond grief. It was not happiness exactly, not yet, but it was a kind of peace, a sense that perhaps she could survive this after all. Warren was patient with her silences and her occasional tears. He never pushed her to talk about her family, but when she finally did, late one night when the loneliness felt too heavy to bear alone, he listened without judgment or empty platitudes. "I keep thinking I see them," Olivia said, her voice breaking. "I will be cooking, and I will turn around expecting to see my mother sitting at the table. Or I will hear a sound and think it is Thomas playing. And then I remember, and it is like losing them all over again." Warren reached across the table and took her hand. It was the first time he had initiated such contact, and his touch was warm and solid and real. "It gets easier," he said. "Not easy, but easier. The pain becomes something you can carry instead of something that carries you, and one day you will think of them and smile before you cry." "Did that happen for you? With Mary and Catherine?" "It did. It took time, longer than I wanted, but it happened. I can think of Mary now and remember the good times, the laughter, the way she sang while she worked. For a long time, I could only remember the end, the blood and the screaming and the terrible silence after. But that faded, and the love came back into focus." Olivia squeezed his hand, grateful beyond words for this understanding, for the knowledge that she was not alone in her grief. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for being patient with me." "We heal each other," Warren said simply. "That is what people do when they care about each other. They help carry the weight until it gets lighter." That night, lying in bed under Mary's quilt, Olivia realized that something had shifted inside her. She was beginning to care about Warren, truly care about him, not just as the man who had saved her from destitution, but as a person in his own right. She admired his strength and his gentleness, his honesty and his quiet humor. She looked forward to their meals together, to their conversations on the porch, to the way his face softened when he looked at her. It was not love, not yet, but it was the beginning of something that could become love, given time and nurturing. The thought both terrified and thrilled her. Autumn came to Montana in a blaze of gold and red, the aspens turning bright against the evergreen pines, the air sharp with the promise of winter. Olivia had learned the rhythms of the ranch now, knew when to expect Warren and his men for meals, knew how to tend the chickens and gather eggs, knew how to preserve vegetables from the garden for the long, cold months ahead. She had also begun to venture into town occasionally, riding in the wagon beside Warren when he went for supplies. The people of Benton were curious about her, this Eastern woman who had come west to marry their most eligible bachelor, but they were kind too. The women at the general store invited her to their quilting circle, and the librarian showed her the small collection of books available for borrowing. One afternoon in late October, Olivia was in the kitchen making bread when she heard shouting from the direction of the barn. She wiped her hands on her apron and hurried outside, her heart pounding with sudden fear. Warren and his men were gathered around one of the horses, and even from a distance, Olivia could see that something was wrong. "What happened?" she called as she approached. "Horse spooked and kicked Tom in the leg," Jake called back. "Might be broken." Olivia pushed through to where Tom sat on the ground, his face white with pain, his left leg bent at an unnatural angle. She had helped nurse her family through their final illness, and while she had not been able to save them, she had learned something about tending injuries. "We need to get him inside and splint that leg," she said firmly. "Warren, you and Miguel carry him. Jake, fetch me some straight boards from the woodpile and strips of cloth from the rag bin." The men looked surprised at her sudden authority, but they obeyed. Within minutes, they had Tom stretched out on the table in the house, and Olivia was carefully cutting away his pant leg to examine the break. It was bad, but not as terrible as it could have been. The bone had not broken through the skin. "This is going to hurt," she warned Tom, who nodded grimly. "Warren, hold his shoulders. Miguel, hold his good leg steady." With practiced hands, Olivia set the bone as straight as she could manage, working quickly while Tom bit down on a leather strap to keep from screaming. She splinted the leg with the boards Jake brought, wrapping them tight with strips of cloth, then stepped back, her hands shaking with the aftermath of adrenaline. "Someone should ride for the doctor in town, have him come check my work," she said. "But I think that will hold until then." Warren was staring at her with something like wonder in his eyes. "Where did you learn to do that?" "My mother was involved with charity work in Philadelphia," Olivia explained. "She often visited the poor neighborhoods and tended to people who could not afford doctors. She taught me what she knew, said it was important for women to have practical skills as well as social graces." "You probably saved Tom from losing that leg," Jake said gruffly. "The closest doctor is 3 hours away. If that bone had been left to set wrong, could have been real bad." Tom, pale but conscious, managed a weak smile. "Thank you, Mrs. Sutton. I owe you." The doctor confirmed Olivia's work when he arrived that evening, praising her skill and saying there was nothing more he would have done differently. Word spread quickly through the small ranching community about how the new Mrs. Sutton had handled the emergency with such calm competence, and Olivia found herself welcomed more warmly when she next went to town. But more importantly, something had changed between her and Warren. That night, after Tom had been settled in the spare room and the men had returned to the bunkhouse, Warren found Olivia sitting on the porch, wrapped in a shawl against the autumn chill. "You were remarkable today," he said, sitting down beside her. "The way you took charge, the way you knew exactly what to do, I was proud to call you my wife." Olivia felt warmth spread through her chest at his words. "I was terrified," she admitted, "but someone had to act and I had the knowledge, so I did what needed to be done." "That is what courage is," Warren said. "Not the absence of fear, but acting despite it." He was quiet for a moment, then added, "I realize I have been selfish, Olivia. I have been so focused on giving you time and space that I have not told you how much your presence here has meant to me. This house feels like a home again. I find myself looking forward to each day instead of just enduring them. You have brought light back into my life." Olivia turned to look at him, seeing the honesty in his eyes, the vulnerability in the set of his shoulders. "You have done the same for me," she said softly. "When I arrived here, I was so lost in grief that I could barely see beyond the next moment. But you have been patient and kind, and you have helped me find my way back to myself. I am grateful for that, Warren, more grateful than I can express." "I do not want your gratitude," Warren said, his voice rough with emotion. "I want your happiness. I want you to feel safe and cared for. And I want you to know that I have come to care for you deeply, not just as my wife in name, but as a woman I admire and respect, and if I am being honest, am beginning to love." The last word hung in the air between them, fragile and precious. Olivia's heart was pounding so hard she was certain Warren could hear it. "I am beginning to love you too," she whispered. "It frightens me sometimes, the idea of opening my heart again after so much loss, but I cannot seem to help it." Warren reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wished, and cupped her face in his hand. His palm was rough against her cheek, but his touch was infinitely tender. "Let me heal your heart slowly," he said. "Let me show you that love does not always end in loss, that sometimes it grows stronger and deeper with time. I know I cannot replace what you have lost, but I can offer you a future, a life here with me if you will have it." "I will have it," Olivia breathed, and then Warren was kissing her, soft and sweet and full of promise. It was her first real kiss, and it sent warmth flooding through her entire body, washing away some of the cold that had lived in her bones since her family died. When they pulled apart, both breathless, Warren rested his forehead against hers. "I will spend every day trying to make you happy," he promised. "You already do," Olivia replied, and she realized it was true. Somewhere between arriving in Benton Hollow with grief and this moment on the porch with autumn stars bright overhead, she had begun to heal. She would always carry the loss of her family, would always have a tender place in her heart for her mother and father and little Thomas. But the pain was no longer all-consuming. There was room now for new love, new hope, new life. That night, Olivia moved her things into the spare room where Tom had been staying after they relocated him to the bunkhouse for better rest. But it was not because Warren demanded it or because she felt obligated. It was because she wanted to be closer to him, wanted to fall asleep knowing he was just on the other side of the wall, wanted to wake up and share breakfast with him and plan their days together. Winter came hard that year, with snow piling up against the house and the wind howling like a living thing through the long dark nights. But inside, Olivia and Warren were warm, their love growing deeper as they were forced to spend more time together, talking and laughing and learning the thousand small details that make up a life shared. Warren taught Olivia to play chess, and she taught him to braid leather. They read together in the evenings, sitting close by the fire, sometimes discussing the books and sometimes just enjoying the companionable silence. They made plans for spring, for expanding the garden and maybe adding a room onto the house. They talked about the future with excitement instead of dread, and one night, After a particularly fierce blizzard had kept them trapped inside for 3 days, Olivia went to Warren's door and knocked softly. He opened it immediately, concern on his face. "Is something wrong?" "No," Olivia said, her heart in her throat. "Nothing is wrong. I just do not want to sleep alone anymore. I want to be with you, truly with you, as your wife in every sense." Warren's eyes darkened with desire, but he searched her face carefully. "Are you certain?" "I do not want you to feel pressured or rushed." "I am certain," Olivia said, stepping into his room and closing the door behind her. "You have been patient and kind, and I am grateful for that. But I am healed enough now, Warren. I want this. I want you." What passed between them that night was tender and sweet and full of love. Warren was gentle with Olivia, aware that she was inexperienced, taking his time to make sure she felt cherished and safe. And when they finally came together, it felt right in a way that Olivia had not known was possible, like two pieces of a puzzle fitting perfectly into place. Afterward, lying in Warren's arms with her head on his chest and his fingers running gently through her hair, Olivia felt a peace she had not experienced since before her family's death. This was home now. This man, this place, this life they were building together. It was not what she had planned, not what she had dreamed of as a girl in Philadelphia, but it was real and good and hers. "I love you," she whispered into the darkness. "I love you too," Warren replied, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "I will love you until the day I die, Olivia." "That is a promise." Spring came eventually, as it always does, melting the snow and turning the hills green and dotting them with wildflowers, just as Warren had promised all those months ago. Olivia stood at the window one morning, watching the sunrise paint the sky in shades of pink and gold, and realized she was happy. Truly, deeply happy in a way she had thought impossible after so much loss. Warren came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist, pulling her back against his chest. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "About how different my life is now from what I expected," Olivia said, leaning into his warmth. "About how I came here broken and grieving and you helped me find wholeness again." "You did the same for me," Warren reminded her. "We healed each other." "Yes," Olivia agreed. "We did." That afternoon, Olivia rode into town with Warren to pick up supplies, and they stopped at the church to speak with Reverend Thomas. The minister greeted them warmly, his eyes twinkling with pleasure at the obvious happiness radiating from the couple. "It does my heart good to see you both looking so well," he said. "I confess I had concerns after your wedding day, Mrs. Sutton. You looked so sorrowful, and I worried you might regret your decision." "I have no regrets," Olivia assured him. "Warren has been everything I could have hoped for in a husband and more, which is why we have come to see you. We would like to renew our vows, Reverend. The first ceremony was born of necessity and grief. We would like to marry again, this time out of love and joy." Reverend Thomas beamed. "I would be honored to perform the ceremony. Shall we say 2 weeks from Sunday? That will give you time to invite your friends and prepare a proper celebration." The renewal ceremony was everything their first wedding had not been. Olivia wore a dress of pale yellow that she and the women from the quilting circle had sewn together, decorated with wildflowers that Warren picked himself from the hills around the ranch. Warren wore his best suit, cleaned and pressed, and looked so handsome that Olivia's breath caught when she saw him waiting at the altar. This time, the church was full of people, ranchers and their families, townspeople who had come to know and respect Olivia, Warren's hired hands dressed in their Sunday best. Jake had even brought his wife and children from the neighboring ranch where they lived, and Miguel had invited a pretty young woman named Rosa who worked at the general store. When Olivia walked down the aisle on the arm of Tom, who had recovered well from his injury and insisted on the honor. She kept her eyes locked on Warren's face. She saw love there, pure and shining and unmistakable, and she knew her own face reflected the same emotion. The vows they spoke this time were heartfelt and sincere, each word weighted with the love they had built over the past months. When Reverend Thomas pronounced them husband and wife, Warren did not hesitate. He pulled Olivia into his arms and kissed her soundly, to the applause and cheers of their friends and neighbors. The celebration afterward was held at the ranch, with tables set up outside under the wide Montana sky. There was food and music and dancing, and Olivia found herself laughing more than she had laughed in years. Warren swept her into dance after dance, holding her close and whispering words of love into her ear between songs. As the sun began to set and their guests started to depart, Olivia stood with Warren's arm around her waist, waving goodbye and thanking everyone for coming. When the last wagon had rolled away down the long drive, Warren turned to her with a smile. "Happy, Mrs. Sutton?" "Happier than I knew was possible," Olivia replied honestly. "Thank you for being patient with me, for giving me time to heal, for loving me even when I was broken." "You were never broken," Warren said firmly. "You were hurt and grieving, but never broken. And I would wait a lifetime for you, Olivia. You are worth every moment." That night, as they lay together in the bed that was now fully theirs, Olivia thought about the journey that had brought her here. The pain and loss, the fear and uncertainty, the slow, painful process of learning to live again after death had taken everything she loved. But she thought, too, about the unexpected gift she had found in Warren, in his patience and kindness, and the steady love that had helped her find her way back to herself. "You think we could have children?" she asked quietly. "I know you lost Catherine, and I do not want to bring up painful memories, but I would like to have a family with you if you are willing." Warren was silent for a long moment, and Olivia worried she had pushed too far, asked too much. But then he tightened his arms around her and said, "I would like that very much. I was terrified of trying again after losing Mary and Catherine, but with you, I think I could be brave enough to hope." "We will be brave together," Olivia promised. The seasons turned, summer blazing hot and then fading into autumn, and Olivia discovered she was with child. Warren was beside himself with joy and terror in equal measure, hovering over her constantly, insisting she rest and let him handle all the heavy work. "I am pregnant, not made of glass," Olivia protested, laughing at his worried expression. "Women have been having babies since the beginning of time, Warren. I will be fine." "I know that," Warren said, but his eyes betrayed his fear. "I just cannot lose you, Olivia. I survived it once, but I would not survive it again. You have to promise me you will be careful, that you will tell me if something feels wrong." Olivia cupped his face in her hands, seeing the ghosts of his past haunting his expression. "I promise," she said softly. "But you have to promise me something too. You have to promise not to let fear steal the joy from this experience. We are going to have a baby, Warren. A child made from our love. That is a miracle, and I want us to celebrate it together." Warren nodded, pulling her into his arms. "You are right. I will try to focus on the joy and not the fear." As Olivia's pregnancy progressed, the entire community rallied around them. The women from the quilting circle made tiny clothes and blankets, offering advice and reassurance. The doctor from town rode out once a month to check on her, pronouncing her healthy and strong. Even Warren's hired hands seemed to soften, treating Olivia with an extra layer of gentle care. Winter came again, and Olivia grew large with child, moving more slowly but still insisting on helping with the household tasks. Warren had hired a woman from town, Mrs. Henderson, to come stay with them as the birth drew near, and her presence eased some of his anxiety. Mrs. Henderson had delivered dozens of babies over her 40 years as a midwife, and she radiated calm competence. The baby came on a cold February night in 1884, arriving with a lusty cry that filled the house with sound and life. It was a boy, healthy and strong, with a shock of dark hair and his father's blue eyes. Warren held his son with shaking hands, tears streaming down his face, overcome with emotion. "He is perfect," he whispered, looking at Olivia with such love and gratitude that she felt her own eyes fill with tears. "You are perfect. Thank you for this gift, for our son, for giving me back my hope." They named him Thomas William Sutton, honoring both Olivia's lost brother and Warren's father. Little Thomas thrived, growing plump and happy under the devoted attention of his parents. Warren proved to be a natural father, patient and playful, spending every free moment with his son. Watching Warren with Thomas, seeing the love and wonder on his face, Olivia felt her heart swell with happiness. This was the family she had thought lost to her forever, rebuilt from grief and pain into something new and beautiful. She still missed her mother and father and first Thomas, still felt the ache of their absence, especially on holidays and special occasions. But the pain had mellowed into a sweet sadness, tempered by the joy of her new life. 2 years passed, full and rich with the ordinary miracles of daily life. The ranch prospered under Warren's careful management, and they were able to add onto the house, creating more bedrooms for the growing family they both hoped to have. Olivia had become an integral part of the community, known for her kindness and her skill at nursing, often called upon when someone was sick or injured. When Olivia became pregnant again, Warren was calmer this time, his fear tempered by the successful birth of Thomas. This baby, a daughter they named Mary Grace after Warren's first wife, and in honor of the grace that had brought them together, arrived on a beautiful spring morning in 1886, surrounded by wildflowers and birdsong. Warren held his daughter with the same tender wonder he had shown with his son, but there was something different in his eyes now. "I am not afraid anymore," he told Olivia as she recovered in bed with baby Mary nursing contentedly. "You have taught me that love is stronger than fear, that hope is worth the risk of pain. Thank you for that, Olivia. Thank you for healing my heart and giving me a reason to believe in the future again." "We healed each other," Olivia reminded him, echoing the words he had spoken to her so long ago. "That is what love does. It takes our broken pieces and makes them whole." Life settled into a new rhythm with 2 children. Thomas was a bright, curious boy who followed his father everywhere, already showing signs of the rancher he would someday become. Mary was sweet and gentle, with her mother's green eyes and her father's smile. The house was filled with laughter and noise and the beautiful chaos of family life. On their 4th wedding anniversary, Warren surprised Olivia by recreating their first meal together, complete with the nervous formality that had marked those early days. They sat at the table, across from each other, and Warren raised his coffee cup in a toast. "To the woman who answered my advertisement and changed my life," he said. "To the bravest person I know, who took a chance on a lonely cowboy and helped him remember how to love. I am grateful every day that you chose me, Olivia. Every single day." Olivia felt tears prick her eyes, the good kind of tears that came from overwhelming happiness. "I am grateful too," she said. "When I stepped off that stagecoach, I was so lost and broken. I did not believe I would ever be happy again. But you were patient with me. You gave me time and space to grieve, and you showed me that it was possible to love again without betraying the memory of those I had lost. You saved me, Warren." "No," Warren said gently, reaching across the table to take her hand. "We saved each other. That is the truth of it. I was as lost as you were, maybe more so because I had been alone with my grief for years. You brought light back into my world, Olivia. You gave me hope and love and a family I thought I would never have again." They sat together as the evening deepened, watching through the window as the sun set over the mountains, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and red. Thomas was asleep in his bed, exhausted from a day of helping his father with the horses. Mary was dozing in her cradle, making the soft, snuffling sounds that babies make. "I never imagined this," Olivia said softly. "When I was growing up in Philadelphia, I had such different dreams. I thought I would marry some merchant or lawyer, live in a fine house in the city, attend parties and theater performances. I thought that was what happiness looked like." "Do you regret it?" Warren asked, though there was no fear in his voice, only curiosity. "Do you miss that life?" "Not for a moment," Olivia said firmly. "I found something here that I did not even know I was looking for. Real love, real partnership, a life built on honest work and shared dreams. This ranch, this family, you and our children, this is everything I need. This is where I belong." Warren raised her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles gently. "I love you, Olivia Sutton. I loved you when you arrived grieving and hollow. I loved you as you slowly came back to life. I loved you as you learned to laugh again, and I will love you every day for the rest of my life." "And I love you," Olivia replied. "My lonely cowboy who promised to heal my heart slowly and kept that promise every single day." As the years passed, the Sutton Ranch continued to thrive. Warren's reputation as a fair and skilled cattleman grew, and young men sought work with him knowing they would be treated with respect and paid honest wages. Olivia's skill as a healer became legendary in the area, and she was often called to assist at difficult births or to nurse the sick back to health. Thomas and Mary grew into fine children, healthy and happy, raised with love and the values their parents held dear: hard work, honesty, kindness, and the importance of helping others. Thomas showed early promise as a horseman, and Warren began teaching him the intricacies of running a ranch. Mary was bright and curious, devouring every book Olivia could find for her and showing a particular interest in the healing work her mother did. In the spring of 1890, Olivia discovered she was pregnant once more, much to the delight of the entire family. Thomas, now 6 years old, was very serious about being a big brother to the new baby. Mary, 4, wanted to know if they could have a sister this time because she said Thomas had too many toy soldiers and not enough dolls. This pregnancy was different from the others, harder on Olivia's body now that she was approaching 30. Warren fretted constantly, and even Olivia had moments of worry. But Mrs. Henderson was there again, calm and reassuring, and the doctor made frequent visits as the birth approached. The baby arrived in September, a second son they named Samuel after Olivia's father. He was smaller than the other children had been at birth, and for a few terrifying hours they worried he might not survive. But Samuel proved to be a fighter, and by morning he was nursing strongly, his tiny fists waving with determination. "That is my boy," Warren said proudly, touching one small fist with his finger. "A fighter, just like his mother." With 3 children, the house was even more chaotic, but it was a joyful chaos. Thomas helped look after his younger siblings with surprising maturity for his age. Mary sang to baby Samuel and helped Olivia with small tasks around the house. Warren worked harder than ever to provide for his growing family, but he always made time for his children, telling them stories and teaching them about the land and the animals. In the evenings, after the children were asleep, Warren and Olivia would sit together on the porch, just as they had in those early days of their marriage. They talked about the children and the ranch and their plans for the future. But sometimes they just sat in comfortable silence, holding hands and watching the stars come out over the mountains. "You remember that first night you arrived?" Warren asked one evening. "How lost and sad you looked standing on that platform." "I remember," Olivia said. "I remember thinking I had made a terrible mistake, that I should have stayed in Philadelphia no matter how difficult it would have been. I could not imagine ever being happy again. And now I cannot imagine being anywhere else," Olivia said simply. "This is my home. You are my home. I am exactly where I am meant to be." Years continued to pass in the way they do, each day adding to the rich tapestry of their shared life. The children grew and thrived. Thomas became a skilled horseman and able assistant to his father. Mary learned to read and write with exceptional proficiency, and Olivia began teaching her the basics of healing and herbs. Samuel grew from a fragile infant into a robust little boy with boundless energy and a mischievous streak that kept everyone on their toes. The ranch expanded as well. Warren was able to purchase adjoining land from a neighbor who was moving back east, nearly doubling the size of their holdings. They hired more hands, built a larger bunkhouse, and increased their herd significantly. The Sutton Ranch became one of the most successful operations in that part of Montana Territory. But despite their growing prosperity and the demands of a busy household, Warren and Olivia never lost sight of what truly mattered. They made time for each other, protecting their relationship with the same care they devoted to their children and their land. They went on long rides together when they could steal a few hours away. They danced in the kitchen while cooking dinner. They left each other small notes and tokens of affection tucked into unexpected places. "You are my greatest adventure," Warren told Olivia on their 10th anniversary, pulling her into his arms as they stood in the field behind the house. "Greater than any trail I rode, any land I claimed, any cattle I raised. Loving you has been the grandest adventure of my life." "And you are mine," Olivia replied, rising on her toes to kiss him. "My lonely cowboy who saw through my grief to the woman underneath and loved her anyway. Who gave me time and space and patience until I was ready to love him back. You are everything to me, Warren. Everything." In 1895, Montana achieved statehood, and Benton celebrated with a festival that drew people from all the surrounding ranches and towns. The Sutton family attended together, Warren and Olivia walking hand in hand while their children ran ahead with friends. Thomas, now 11, was becoming a young man, tall and strong like his father. Mary, 9, was turning into a beauty with her mother's grace and her father's kind eyes. Samuel, 5, was a whirlwind of energy, constantly getting into trouble and charming his way out of it. As they watched the fireworks that night, Olivia leaned against Warren's shoulder and felt overwhelming gratitude for the life they had built. She thought about the girl she had been, arriving in Benton Hollow with grief and desperate for any kind of hope. She thought about how Warren had kept his promise to heal her heart slowly, day by day, moment by moment, until she had been whole enough to love again. "What are you thinking about?" Warren asked, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "About how lucky I am," Olivia said. "About how different my life could have been if I had not found the courage to answer your advertisement, if I had not been brave enough to take a chance on a new life in Montana." "I am the lucky one," Warren insisted. "You could have gone anywhere, married anyone, but you chose me, chose this life, and you have made every day since brighter and better than I deserve." "We are both lucky then," Olivia said, snuggling closer. "Lucky to have found each other, lucky to have built this beautiful life together." The years continued to unfold, bringing both joys and challenges. There were harsh winters that tested their endurance and dry summers that threatened the cattle. There were accidents and illnesses, moments of fear and worry. But through it all, Warren and Olivia faced everything together, their love and partnership growing stronger with each passing year. Thomas grew into a fine young man, taking over more and more of the ranch operations as Warren began to slow down slightly with age. At 18, Thomas announced he was courting Sarah Mitchell, the daughter of a neighboring rancher, and Warren and Olivia gave their blessing gladly. The wedding the following year was a joyous occasion, and Olivia cried happy tears as she watched her firstborn make his own promises of love and devotion. Mary showed no interest in romance yet, focused instead on her studies and her healing work. At 16, she had already helped deliver 3 babies and had saved a man's life when he was gored by a bull. She talked about perhaps going to a proper nursing school someday, and Olivia encouraged her ambitions while Warren worried about his daughter going so far from home. Samuel, 12 and full of restless energy, wanted to see the wider world beyond Montana. He talked about going to the new state of Washington or maybe even California, seeing the ocean and the big cities. Warren understood the wanderlust, but hoped his youngest would eventually come back to the land that had raised him. "They are growing up so fast," Olivia said wistfully one evening as she and Warren sat on the porch. "Soon they will all be gone, living their own lives, and it will be just the 2 of us again." "Just the 2 of us," Warren echoed, pulling her close. "Like it was in the beginning, before the children. I loved them from the moment they were born, but I confess there is something appealing about the idea of having you to myself again." Olivia laughed and swatted his arm playfully. "You are terrible, but I know what you mean. I will miss them desperately, but there is something to be said for the quiet years." As it turned out, those quiet years were still far off. Mary showed no inclination to leave for nursing school, finding plenty of work to do in their own community. Samuel's wanderlust faded as he got older, and he became more interested in learning about horse breeding and training. And when Thomas and Sarah had their first child, a daughter named Olivia in honor of her grandmother, Warren and Olivia found themselves adjusting to the role of grandparents with joy and enthusiasm. Little Olivia was a delight, bright and curious and doted upon by everyone on the ranch. Warren, who had been a devoted father, proved to be an even more indulgent grandfather, carving toys and telling elaborate stories and sneaking sweets when Sarah was not looking. "You are spoiling her," Olivia told her husband, though she was smiling. "That is what grandparents are for," Warren replied unrepentantly. "Besides, I am just making up for all the times I was too strict with Thomas." "You were never too strict," Olivia assured him. "You were exactly the father our children needed." As the new century approached, the Sutton Ranch had become one of the most respected operations in Montana. Warren's reputation for fairness and skill had only grown with time, and young ranchers often came to him for advice. Olivia was known throughout the region for her healing abilities, and there were families alive and healthy because of her care. But more than their success or their reputation, Warren and Olivia were known for the love they showed each other, a love that had endured through decades and trials and the countless small difficulties of daily life. They were proof that love could survive grief, that 2 broken people could heal each other, that patience and kindness could build something lasting and beautiful. On their 20th anniversary in 1902, their children threw them a surprise party, inviting everyone from the surrounding area. The house and yard were filled with people, young and old, all celebrating the couple who had become pillars of their community. Thomas stood up to make a toast, his wife and daughter beside him. "My parents taught me what true love looks like," he said, his voice thick with emotion. They showed me that partnership means supporting each other through hard times as well as good times. They taught me that healing takes patience, that sometimes the best thing you can do for someone is give them space to grieve while letting them know you will be there when they are ready. My mother arrived here broken by loss, and my father kept his promise to heal her heart slowly. But the truth is, they healed each other, and in doing so, they built a family and a life that has been a blessing to everyone who knows them. Olivia was crying openly by the time Thomas finished, and Warren was not far behind. They stood together, surrounded by their children and grandchildren and friends, and felt the full weight of their blessings. "I would do it all again," Warren said that night as they prepared for bed, the house finally quiet after the long day of celebration. Every moment, every challenge, every fear and joy and everything in between. "I would do it all again exactly the same way because it led me to you and to this life we have built." "As would I," Olivia said, brushing a strand of gray hair back from his forehead. He was older now, his face more lined, his hair more silver than dark. But to her, he was still the lonely cowboy who had met her at the station with kindness in his eyes and a promise to heal her heart. "You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Warren Sutton. Answering your advertisement was the bravest thing I ever did, and I have never regretted it for a single moment." They held each other close that night, grateful for the years behind them and hopeful for the years ahead. They had loved and lost and loved again, had built something strong and lasting from the ashes of their grief. They had kept their promises to each other, had healed each other's hearts slowly and surely, day by day, until their separate sorrows had been transformed into shared joy. As the years continued to pass, Warren and Olivia grew older together, their love maturing and deepening like fine wine. They celebrated more anniversaries, welcomed more grandchildren, and watched with pride as their children built their own successful lives. Thomas took over the ranch completely, running it with the same integrity his father had shown. Mary eventually married a doctor who came to Benton from back east, and together, they opened a proper medical practice. Samuel did leave for a while, spending 2 years in California, but he came back changed and ready to settle down, eventually marrying and starting his own smaller ranch on a portion of land Warren deeded to him. In the summer of 1915, Warren and Olivia celebrated their 33rd anniversary with a quiet dinner at home, just the two of them. They were both in their 60s now, slowed by age but still active and engaged with life. Warren's hair was completely silver, and his hands were gnarled from decades of hard work, but his eyes still lit up when he looked at Olivia. She had lines around her eyes and her own silver threads running through her auburn hair, but she was still beautiful to him, still the woman who had stepped off that stage coach all those years ago and changed his life forever. "We have been blessed," Warren said, raising his glass to toast his wife. "More blessed than I ever dreamed possible when I placed that advertisement seeking a wife. I thought I would find someone to keep house and share my life, someone to ease the loneliness, but I found so much more. I found my other half, the woman who completes me and makes me better than I could ever be alone." "And I found healing," Olivia said, her eyes shining with tears of joy. "I found hope when I thought all hope was lost. I found love when I thought my heart was too broken to ever love again." "You kept your promise, Warren. You healed my heart slowly, patiently, perfectly. And in the process, you gave me a life beyond anything I could have imagined." They danced that night in the kitchen to no music but the beating of their hearts, holding each other close and remembering all the dances that had come before. The nervous first dance at their renewal ceremony when they were still learning each other. The joyful dances when their children were born. the quiet dances in the kitchen while cooking dinner, the celebratory dances at weddings and parties, each dance a thread in the rich tapestry of their life together. The years rolled on, bringing both joy and sorrow as the years always do. They lost friends to age and illness. They celebrated the births of great-grandchildren. They watched the world change around them, technology and progress transforming the frontier they had known into something more settled and civilized. But through it all, Warren and Olivia remained constant, their love the bedrock upon which their family and their community was built. They were proof that even the deepest grief could be healed with time and patience and love, that two wounded souls could find each other and create something whole and beautiful. In the spring of 1925, Olivia fell ill with pneumonia. She was 71 years old, and despite her own healing knowledge and Mary's medical expertise, and the best care the doctors could provide, she grew weaker with each passing day. Warren barely left her side, holding her hand and telling her stories of their life together, reminding her of all the beautiful moments they had shared. "I am not ready to let you go," he whispered one evening as she lay propped up on pillows, her breathing labored. "I need more time with you, Olivia. We were supposed to grow old together." "We did grow old together," Olivia said, her voice weak but still full of love. "We had 43 beautiful years, Warren. 43 years of love and laughter and family. That is more than most people ever get." "We were so blessed. But I want more," Warren said, tears streaming down his weathered face. "I want another 43 years. I want forever." Olivia reached up with a trembling hand to touch his cheek. "You will always have me," she promised. "Even when I am gone, I will be with you. In the wind that blows across the prairie, in the mountains we loved so much, in the faces of our children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. I will never truly leave you, my darling, just like you never truly left Mary and Catherine. Love does not end with death. It transforms, but it endures." For a moment, Olivia seemed to rally, finding strength from somewhere deep within. She looked at Warren with clear eyes, seeing the man she had loved for more than 4 decades, the lonely cowboy who had promised to heal her heart and had kept that promise every single day. "Thank you," she said softly. "Thank you for being patient with me when I arrived hollow with grief. Thank you for giving me time to heal. Thank you for showing me that I could love again without betraying the memory of those I had lost. Thank you for our children and our life together. Thank you for every moment, every kindness, every act of love. You gave me a beautiful life, Warren Sutton. The most beautiful life I could have imagined." Warren leaned down and kissed her gently, tasting the salt of both their tears. "You gave me the same," he said. "You took a lonely, grieving man and taught him to live again. You filled this house with light and laughter. You gave me a family and a purpose, and a reason to wake up each morning with joy. Everything good in my life came from you, Olivia. Everything." They sat together through the night, Warren holding Olivia in his arms, their children and grandchildren gathered nearby. And as the sun rose over the Montana mountains, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, just like that first morning when Olivia had looked out the window and realized she was beginning to heal, she took one last peaceful breath and slipped away, surrounded by love. Warren grieved deeply for his beloved wife, but it was a different grief than he had known when Mary died. That grief had been sharp and desperate, full of anger and fear and terrible loneliness. This grief was softer, tempered by gratitude for the years they had shared, and the knowledge that they had loved each other completely. He missed Olivia with every fiber of his being, but he did not feel alone because she was still with him in all the ways that mattered. He continued to live on the ranch, now run entirely by Thomas, but still his home. He played with his great-grandchildren and told them stories about their great-grandmother, the brave woman who had traveled west from Philadelphia to marry a stranger and had built a beautiful life from the ashes of her grief. He walked the land he loved, seeing Olivia in every wildflower and hearing her voice in every breeze. And 3 years later, in the summer of 1928, Warren passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 73. His children found him in the morning, a smile on his face, holding a faded photograph of Olivia from their renewal ceremony day. They buried him next to his beloved wife on a hill overlooking the ranch, under the wide Montana sky they had both loved so much. The legacy of Warren and Olivia Sutton lived on in their descendants, who continued to ranch the land and serve their community with integrity and kindness. The story of their love became family legend, told and retold to each new generation as an example of what true partnership could be. People spoke of the mail-order bride who arrived with grief and the lonely cowboy who promised to heal her heart slowly. They spoke of how two broken people found each other and built something whole and lasting. They spoke of patience and kindness and the transformative power of love. The ranch house still stood decades later, expanded and modernized but still recognizable as the place where Warren and Olivia had built their life together. And on quiet evenings when the wind blew across the prairie and the mountains turned purple in the fading light, some people swore they could see two figures walking hand in hand across the fields, forever together, forever in love, their hearts healed and whole at last. The story of Warren and Olivia Sutton became more than just family history. It became a testament to the resilience of the human heart, to the possibility of healing after loss, to the power of patient, steady love. It reminded people that grief does not last forever, that broken hearts can be mended, that sometimes the greatest love stories begin in the darkest moments of our lives. And so their love endured, not just in memory but in the very fabric of the land they had walked together, in the family they had created, in the community they had helped build. It endured as a promise that even in the midst of terrible loss, there is hope for healing. That even when we think we will never love again, someone might come along and slowly, patiently, tenderly help us find our way back to joy. The mail-order bride who arrived with grief found healing in the arms of the lonely cowboy who understood her pain. And together, they created a love story for the ages, a reminder that the human heart has infinite capacity for renewal, for hope, for love. Their story ended not in sorrow but in celebration of a life well lived and a love well earned, leaving behind a legacy that would inspire generations to come.